Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to share with you the first time I am using a Glimmer machine. I was fortunate enough to get one as a Christmas gift, and long story short, just received it last week. So I figured I would film my first time using it and just share a few tips and tricks I learned along the way. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, I have a Big Shot machine, so that's what I'll be using it with. So on my platform, it is ready. The platform is ready. I've got it plugged in, turned on. I have my plates down. I put the foil with the pretty side down, and then I put the cardstock that I'm foiling onto and put the plates on top. Once it's ready, after the timer has gone off, I'm going to run it through the embossing or my die cut machine, my Big Shot machine. Now, what I did before running it through my Big Shot machine, while everything was still cold, I layered it with what the stacking I thought it should be and ran it through just to make sure that that stacking was correct. I didn't want to be playing around with it with hot plates. So by doing this, I could ensure that if it was wrong, I could get the stacking till it was right without having hot plates doing it. So this is the very first foiling there. Turned out pretty good. It's a little bit crooked on the piece of cardstock there, and I do have a little bit of excess foiling there, but I did get a sand eraser to remove that so that can be fixed. I moved those hot plates off, and I've got a new plate here that I'm putting on the Glimmer machine to get that ready. I put some foil down, pretty side down, and then I'm adding my paper. Now the cardstock I'm using is Hammer Mill cardstock. I've watched a few videos and that one was highly recommended, so that's what I chose and I'm quite happy with it. It's nice and affordable for how much cardstock you get, so I love that. So it's a great way to be able to use it and practice and play without worrying about ruining a bunch of expensive cardstock. So I did find running it back and forth through the machine was very helpful. And the funny thing is I've been die cutting for years, and so that comes second nature. So foiling, because it's a new thing, I'm still trying to get into the rhythm, into the it still feels very new and awkward. Now here is where I made a mistake. You can see that I don't have the platform plugged in. So that needs to be plugged in, and then your platform should be ready before you take it off of, or before you press the timer button. It didn't really matter. I just waited until it was the platform was ready and then pressed my timer button. But just so you know, I found that it works best as soon as I'm done with it, just to plug it right back in, especially if I know I'm going to be using it again. With all the awkwardness of using a new machine and trying to get used to it, I did miss filming a few different sections, but I don't think you really miss it because I do repeat a lot of foiling in here. So when foiling first came out, I thought it was a huge fad and I didn't want to spend money on something that I didn't think I was really going to get into and that I thought was going to be short-lived. Clearly, I was very wrong about this, but the other thing that I didn't want is, you see all that foil coming off? To me, that was just such a huge waste, and I just couldn't justify foiling something and then not being able to use all of that excess. So recently, I've just learned that Pink Fresh Studios came out with a solid foil plate, and that was kind of the game changer. That's what flipped me over to the wanting a foiling machine side, because I realized that that foil, that leftover foil, wouldn't go to waste. It would have a second life, a second use, and that's what really convinced me that I wanted to check this out and start adding foiling to my cards. Now, I've tried a few different foiling methods without using a foiling machine, so I do have some videos on here doing those, and I will link them or I will put links to them in the description if you are wanting to look at that. If you're not wanting to invest in a foil machine, I completely understand because I was there. But this solid foil plate means that all of these pieces here that normally would have gone to waste can be used, and I absolutely love that. To me, it's less waste. I keep repeating myself, but I like the fact that those are going to be used and not just tossed out. So I have the foiling machine on there. I waited till it was nice and warm and then put the remaining foil and my cardstock, and now running that through here. The other thing that I found a little bit difficult to get used to is the fact that the plug-in for the platform and the Glimmer Machine is really, really snug. So I always feel like I'm going to ruin things by pulling that out. That's just going to take a little bit of time to get used to. I'm not sure if it's going to become less tight through use, so we will find that out. So all of these next foiling pieces is all just using some of those pieces that would have gotten the waste from the first foiling is basically what I'm trying to say. Now I will show you how I created the cards at the end, and once again, foiling is very new to me, so they're not necessarily my favorite cards. They were a work in progress and they're a learning experience. Some I like more than others. Some I think are just a little bit too much, especially the holographic foil that I used. But you'll see that at the end. And I think what you could use with these is just take some of those pieces that you foiled, the excess, and if you're not necessarily going to use them as is, you could likely easily die cut them. So here's another mistake that I made. I didn't run it through the machine all the way to the end of the solid foil plate. So you see at the end, I missed it. I missed the end of the sentiment as well as that image. So what I did was, no harm done. I figured it's ruined now anyways. Let's see what happens if we put it through again. So I lined that foil back up with the sentiment, and then I put some tape on there and put it on the machine again to heat up, and then ran it through the machine again. Now the sentiment worked perfectly. I could use it, cut it. You wouldn't even know that it was done twice and had to be fixed. The flower part of it didn't work so well. The tape that I was using was just dye tape that I had, and it ended up being too thick. So you'll see that it makes a mark there. And I do have some thinner tape on order to be able to do this a little bit better without having anything ruined. But it's nice that the sentiment was fixed. And just so you know, if you do happen to make a mistake like that, it's possible to fix it. So now I've got another piece in the foiling machine here and running it through. Now I did notice a few times that the plates shifted a little bit as I was pulling it out because I was tugging so hard on my Glimmer Machine to dislodge the plate. And I was happy to know that once I put it through the dyeing machine, it didn't ruin anything. So if by chance your plates happen to move or shift, it's probably going to be fine. But it's nice to know that it requires both the heat as well as the pressure of the machine. So things just shifting a little bit while you're pulling them out isn't necessarily going to ruin anything. So I've die cut my sentiments. These are some sentiment dies from Spellbinders. I'll link all of the supplies I'm using in the description down below, but they have the foiling plates as well as the dies to cut the pieces out there. And if you're new to die cutting, I have a whole playlist that's Big Shot for Beginners. It goes through how to use a Big Shot machine and whatnot. You can check that out if you are interested. But basically, I'm just lining up the dies with the foiling, and it was really easy to see and really easy to line up to get them to cut well. I like to tape them in place so I know they're not going to shift on my machine as I go through them. And there we've got, with each foiling, you get 2 sentiments because you get the foil part as well as the reverse part. So I love that. After I have everything foiled, I'm taking some dye inks as well as some detail blending brushes, and I'm just blending all of the inks to color those images. Now, once again, because this is all new, some I like more than others. Some I think it's too much, or you don't really necessarily see the ink. But like I said, it's a work in progress and it's a learning experience. And sometimes you don't necessarily find things out until you've tried them. Also, sometimes you don't find out things are your cup of tea or not your cup of tea until you try them and just see. I do like these detailed blending brushes though, because you can get into nice fine areas and you just have a little bit more control than with the larger ink blending brushes for backgrounds or for stencils. So they worked very well for that. A nice thing about ink blending over the foil is the foil resists the ink. So once you're done ink blending, you can take a dry paper towel or a dry cloth and just wipe over it gently just to remove any ink that might be on top of the foil. But it's nice that you can still see the foil right through. You're not going to cover anything up. And the other thing is, for the reverse part, it's nice to be able to color some of the white areas just to be able to customize it and see the design and the detail a little bit more. Now, yes, I'm inking my foiling, but it's not necessarily necessary. If you like it without the ink, you can absolutely leave it like that. I just thought it could use a little bit more. And because this is the first time using the foils, I just really wanted to take the time to experiment with some different things and just try some different things out. There's definitely some that I liked the inking on and some that I didn't think it needed it at the end, but it's a great way to just play and experiment and just see what it is that you like, what you're going to use it for, and just different techniques that you like to use with your foiling. Now, if you have some favorite techniques that you love to use with foiling and you've done it for a little bit and you're still here, pop them in the comments. I'm really interested to see what other people are doing and to play and experiment with those. So I'm just going to continue to ink here. I'll let you just sit and watch, and then I'll come back when I go and start putting some cards together. I'm back, and as you can see, I did choose to color some of the sentiments as well, just to help them pop a little bit. Again, not necessary. You could likely also foil on colored cardstock, but I just wanted the sentiment to match the color of the inking. This particular card here is one of the ones that you miss a lot of the detail of the flower image. So that particular foil was not a good choice for that particular design, but you live and learn. So for this particular one here, because it's on their Cricut, I'm going to take an oval die that happens to match the oval from that foiling plate, and I'm going to cut it out to go onto the front of a card. The first foiling, I've already cut that part into just an oval. I tried to cut around it like with a little bit of a scallop, and I really didn't like how it turned out. So in the end, just so that the whole thing didn't go to waste, I cut the center out right along the outside of the foiling. And I like how this looks. It's very simple. It's not something elaborate in any way, shape, or form. Probably not a card that I would make very often, but it is something nice and simple. Maybe good for like a masculine card, or just something very simple and elegant, because I do love the foil part. It's just hard sometimes with an oval on a card and not a whole lot else. Maybe an extra die cut on the front of it would be nice as well. But other than those sentiments that I have that have the dies to them, I don't have any foiling plates, say florals or whatever with dies, but that could look good on this oval one here. So the other thing that I'm doing here is I'm just putting some of the cards together. Some of those, that floral side piece here, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, I just cut it out by hand with scissors just to be able to put it on a different background. Because I am brand new to this, I didn't get a perfect foiling for all of them, so I wanted to cut out any areas that were not absolutely perfect, and I also wanted to be able to see the sentiment on it. So by cutting it out, that was just the easiest way to achieve that. Another way to add some dimension here is some of those sentiments there, I cut a couple extra pieces of white cardstock and glued them behind so that they can have some dimension without actually needing to use some foam pop dots. I also matted some of these on cards as well as did some double mats just to add some extra colors in the card bases. I'm using my favorite Distress Collage medium to glue the cards together. I love Distress Collage medium because it dries completely clear and it dries matte, so if anything seeps out onto cardstock or whatnot, you don't see it. You'll never know it's there. The other thing that I like to do, and you've seen me do this here a couple times, is I like to put an acrylic block on something once I've just glued it down. That way that block will hold it down and in place rather than me having to hold it. I can continue working on other things. I've got some of the pieces here that I've actually double matted. This was the side floral piece on this one here was the one that was the mistake at the end, so it's cut a little bit shorter. And you might notice that piece of cardstock that I just glued down, the back side of it had half of it faded from the sun. Just because one side of your cardstock is faded doesn't mean it needs to be totally thrown out. You can cut it down, or the other side likely won't be faded, so you can just use that side there. Just a good reminder to check the back side if you have some fading or whatnot, because it could likely still be used. You could even just die cut with the faded part too for a different project. This particular sentiment here, I took that same coral color that I have on the background of my card and I cut that a few extra times with the sentiment just to add the extra dimension, but I wanted it to be able to match that card and not have white on the side of my die cut. So just a reminder that if you do use extra die cuts for dimension, you can match them to whatever die cut you're using. You don't necessarily need to just use white, but it again is a great way to use up scraps and a great way to add dimension without using foam pop dots. And just like the other pieces, once that's glued down to the card, I'll put an acrylic block on there to hold it in place. Just make sure that it is nice and secure while it's drying. So in the end, I ended up creating 5 cards from this first foiling session. So this is the first one using the dies or the foiling plates that come with the machine. And then the other ones are using some spellbinders, a floral design, as well as the sentiments. Once again, the exact ones I'm using will be listed in the description down below, as well as the different foils that I used for these projects. And while I've learned a few things along the way, I really, really love foiling and am so excited to do more of it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.